I never use microphones like this, so we'll give it a try. Having had 2 kids, I'm a hog caller. And because we're going to talk about brains, I want you all to get up. Okay, I want you all to go like this. Whoops. Okay? And now I want you all to turn around 3 times. You can count. Let's go. Okay. All right, now you can sit down. So why did I do that? I did that because you really have an attention span of 10 to 20 minutes, and you guys have been sitting for over an hour. We didn't get a good placement. Ask Craig about that. So, but I think that actually in terms of the content, oh, good, okay. Yay, is this better? Okay. Excuse me. In terms of the content, the reason I come near the end is because what I'm going to tell you is why all the things that everybody else said worked, and why you all clapped for Anne. Anne was the only person we clapped for. The reason we clapped for her was she's the only one who got us here. And the reason we have to get us here is because 95% of how you think happens in the unconscious. And the unconscious could care less about the rational world. It's never met it, and it doesn't want to know it. 93% of what you communicate is nonverbal. Don't tell the lawyers that, they'll fire you. But it's true. 93% is nonverbal, okay? And 66% of what you remember and what you see is visual. We take it all in through our eyes. Second, we take it in through smell. And those are because the brain has a big job to do. Its job, ever since I'm not good at numbers, 10 million years ago, approximately more or less, is to keep us safe. So it's got to look around to make sure that sticks aren't snakes, and it's got to be smelling to see what's coming up behind it, what's coming up around it, whether you can eat it, or it's going to eat you, or what's going to happen. Now, the more we understand how the brain works, and how amazing it is, but how also Neanderthal it is, the more we can understand how to be effective communicators, not just with lawyers, but with our kids, our husbands, our parents, people we meet on the subway, things like that. I'm from New York, sorry. Y'all don't have subways here. So, oh, you do have subways, that's true, but you don't call them subways. That's true, you don't. Everybody's brain works differently because everybody's brain is tuned into your past experiences. The way the brain works is that there are 3 parts. 2 parts are unconscious. They're the ones that count. The third part is the cortex. That's the one we count on. Okay, so the first part we call lovingly the reptile. It's the one that's been around forever. It's your brainstem right here, and what it does is it controls the ability to sit, the ability to breathe, the ability to have your heart rate not going flutter, 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 the ability to do all of those kinds of housekeeping things. You need it. And the reptile is the first gatekeeper of our brains, and it only cares about 2 things, sex and safety. Because if I can't reproduce and I can't stay alive, there's no point to all this. Now, that is the first gatekeeper. And if you take a look at, Berkey was saying this, a lot of people have been saying it, I'm just saying it a little differently. If you look at most advertisements, you'll see that they are about sex or safety. So what's a Volvo? A Volvo's about a baby in the back seat. Excuse me? What's that got to do with driving a car? Nothing, but it's got everything to do with why you remember that, whether you drive a Volvo or not. And when you go to a car show, who's showing the car? Is it a man who really understands how to drive it and can talk about the innards, or is it a beautiful 12-year-old? Got the reptile every time. Okay, so now I've got the reptile. And what am I going to do next? Well, next what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the part that matters. And it's called the limbic system if you're going to be technical about it, but we call it the dog because it goes around barking and yelling and sniffing. And it's the part that has to do with the 4 Fs. Fighting, fleeing, oh, I just missed one. No, I never missed one. Okay, hold on one second. Fighting, fleeing, feeding, and reproduction. The 4 Fs. So, It is where the emotional center is. It has the oh shit center that says, I think there's going to be a problem here, pay attention. It has the emotional center that says, you're just like me, let's have some rapport here, which is what everybody's been telling you, is to make people feel comfortable with you. That's the one that does that. Now, if it doesn't think that you're comfortable, then one of the two always works. Either it's oh shit or I love you. There's not much in between. It doesn't really care. It's not, it doesn't do that. Then there's the hippocampus, if you want to call it by its real name, and that's the one that takes everything you say and puts it into short-term memory. What you want to do is turn it into long-term memory, and we'll talk about a couple of ways of doing that. The third one that's there is the thalamus, and the thalamus is the one that controls all of the senses except smell. So all of them are controlled throughout. Okay, so those three guys work together really closely. And then there's the cortex, the one that lawyers love, and the one we're going to talk about how lawyers deal with that in a bit, because what I want to teach you is a few ways of using what you know about the brain to understand what to say to lawyers and how to phrase it for them. Okay, so what happens is that information comes into your brain, and it's coming the third part is the cortex, excuse me. The cortex is basically, think about a napkin, a cloth napkin that you can see through, and it's probably the equivalent of sort of like an 8x8. It's a small napkin, and it covers from here to here like a little veil kind of thing, and it's the youngest part of our brain. It's still got maturing to do. It takes it longer to grow up. As we now know, people don't get fully mature in the cortex until they're between 25 and 30. So for those of you who have teenagers, up how long it's going to be till you can talk to them. And then the cortex is our executive decision maker. The cortex is where willpower is. So you look at dessert and you say, I don't need to eat 3, I'll eat only 1. The emotions are going, eat more, I like it. It's chocolate ice cream, let's go. And the cortex is going, no, you have a dress to get in tomorrow. So it does that. It's the executive decision maker. It's the one that decides what the answer is going to be, and it's the only part of the brain that can combine various points of view, various bits of information into a coherent part. So it's really an important thing. And it's the difference between us and animals. And the reason that our thinking part, the cortex, is even available at all is because we learned to stand up. In the process of standing up, we saved energy. That is what is behind the fact that we have a working cortex at all. Our brain is 2% of our body weight and 25% of our energy use. So all of you who want to have brains that are really good should be drinking a 8-ounce glass of water for every 25 pounds of body weight, and you should be exercising a lot. And when you can't think of the answer to something, you should get up and walk around. Because the brain was designed to be used when we used to walk 10 to 12 miles a day in the savannah. It doesn't like to sit all day like this. It's really bored, really hates it. Nothing's getting it going. It doesn't like it. And here's the bad thing about the cortex. The cortex is a receiver, not an initiator. So what that means is that all this stuff comes into your body, into your brain, into the unconscious, and it's coming in really, really fast. And it goes out like a firecracker to all parts of your brain, all different little pieces. If I see a blue car, the color goes one place, the lights go another place. The fact that it's made of steel or aluminum goes to another place. The fact that it's sleek and pretty goes to another place, all over. So it gets cut up into these teeny little pieces. And those teeny little pieces are all over the brain. Now this happens, it goes through approximately 100 miles of brain cells in the blink of an eye, actually faster than the blink of an eye, all the time. So then what happens? Okay, so then I see a beautiful blue car that I want to drive. So the brain says, what do I know about cars? Let me think, what memories do I have of cars? Okay, I'm going to send 7 to 10 pieces of information to the cortex because it can only take 7 or 10 pieces of information at a time. This is the bad part. This is the part as communicators we tend to forget. 7 to 10 pieces of information. Do you know how little that is? The only person who met that criteria today is Anne. She's the only one who only gave you 3 pieces of information. Everybody else stuffed us with more stuff than we're going to remember, including me. So, but I'm glad we had one person who did it right. Okay, so I have 5 minutes, and this is not going to help me any. The next thing is that the cortex then has, within 30 seconds, the cortex decides what the answer is going to be. At the end of 30 seconds, if there's been a lot of emotional content, if it's exciting, and if it's new, and if it's dangerous, it's probably going to go into your long-term memory. So now how are you going to use this when you communicate? Well, the first thing you're going to do is, because the brain has to put things together, it learns by stories and metaphors, as we've heard, but metaphors particularly. And, think about metaphors. We often use the body parts. So one of my favorite is, it's the armpit of the world. Is that really true? No, but we all know what kind of a city that refers to. Or kick in the butt. We all know what kind of behavior that refers to. It's a metaphor. The brain likes that because you can send it quickly from the unconscious to the cortex, and you're saving words, always trying to save words. So what you're going to do when you go out and try to talk to lawyers is you're going to go the way the brain goes. Okay, so first of all, that means you're going to go from the general to the specific. The brain doesn't care about specifics. There's only 10 things there. How much specifics can I have at a time? You really can't. The other thing the brain cannot do is it cannot start over. So if you give it specifics first and then general, you've lost it, because it has to start over again for the general, and remember, it's forgotten the specifics because it didn't see a reason to keep them. So you want to go from the general to the specific. You want to use sentences that are 7 to 12 words long, because that's what people remember. You want to keep paragraphs only 1 to 2 sentences, and you want to pause between them. Why? Because I need you to catch up with where I am. You don't know what I'm going to say next, and you're processing as I go along, and you're trying harder and harder to process and process. So I need to stop and pause like Anne did so that you can catch up with me. She's going to be my model from now on. I'm taking her with me every place I go because she's so perfect for this. And you're welcome, anytime. So another thing you're going to do is you're going to be positive. The brain's kind of funny. If you give it a do sentence, please do this, it's really right there. It's right there answering for you. If you give it a don't sentence, it drops the NT and then goes with what it says. Don't cross the street, you cross the street, because that didn't happen. It doesn't listen to the NT. It doesn't want to hear it. So you want to be very positive when you're trying to say something. And of course, what we call that in our world is buy-in, right? We want to get buy-in. Also, the brain likes to come to its own decisions. So you don't want to present something that's fully formed. You want to let people buy in, what my husband used to call the hairy hand. He wrote a lot for businesses, and he said he always put in something that was wrong, even if it was a spelling mistake, because he wanted them to buy in by finding it, correcting it, and making it part of what they did. You also want to key into the reptile. Remember, the reptile is going to be the first gatekeeper by diagnosing the pain in a situation. Why? Because the reptile's into safety. But then you also want to show the gain, the sexy part of why you wanted to do the pain. You want to talk to the dog in visual, emotional language that's very brief, because that's what the dog likes. And finally, for one last point, if you want people to remember things, there are 2 questions which are the gatekeepers for the brain in terms of whether it's worth it for me to remember it or not. So the first question is, does this information make sense in terms of the rest of my life? Now, when you're talking to lawyers, think about this. One of the problems we have in terms of social media, I think Cheryl's right, but I also think that if 65 and 70-year-olds run your firm, they don't have social media in their experience background. So you go to talk to them about joining LinkedIn and connecting online, and they go, I get clients through golf and dinner. So your job is to take the golf and dinner part and make that relevant and analogous to going online. We just sit there and go, you stupid Neanderthal, you should have gotten that. But that's not true. They're not stupid. They don't have it. If I don't have it in my memory bank, I can't use it. And if I can't use it, I don't get it. Every time we say something that's different, once you make that connection for them, they'll be on the side of LinkedIn because they will have added it to their memory bank. And the second question is does this information have meaning for me? Remember how we all talk about being relevant? Well, the reason we have to be relevant is because if it doesn't have meaning for me, I can't pull up the relevant memories. If I can't pull up the relevant memories, I didn't hear it. So when you're talking to lawyers particularly who think that we're all rational and logical, you want to look and find out where they're coming from and create rapport for them by using their language and by speaking to them from the general to the specific and by short bursts of knowledge. Thank you.